There's a quiet shift happening in leadership right now. So let's talk about it because, well, I'm seeing it everywhere. In the conversations I'm having, in the rooms leaders are sitting in, and in the way authority is actually being felt rather than formally defined. For a long time, leadership was shaped around staying composed under pressure, making decisions quickly and keeping things moving regardless of what was happening internally. Many of us, myself included, have built successful careers by becoming the safe pair of hands, the one who didn't get stressed, or so it seemed. But something's changing. In this episode of Project Joyful, I'm exploring why regulation, not suppression, is becoming the real marker of authority and leadership. We're looking at how nervous systems shape influence, why teams subconsciously orient to the state of the leader, and how appearing calm can actually create vigilance rather than trust. This is a grounded, science-informed conversation about leadership and responsibility, and about what happens when biology is no longer ignored, not as a wellness trend, but as something central to how leadership actually works. If you're a leader who carries a lot, if things are working on the surface, but still some days feel harder than they should do, or if you're sensing there's a more sustainable way to hold authority without losing your edge, then this episode's for you. Let's get started, shall we? Welcome to Project Joyful, the podcast for health-centered leaders. Project Joyful is a space for conversations at the intersection of leadership, health, and lived experience. Here we explore what it means to lead in ways that honour your body, protect long-term capacity, and support a life that feels as good on the inside as it looks on the outside. This episode is part of the Biology of Leadership series. In this series, we explore leadership through your body, not as a performance to optimize or a mindset to fix, but as a biological experience shaped over time. Leadership doesn't just live in decisions, strategies, or roles. It lives in your nervous system and how responsibility is held and how reliability and care quietly organize your body long before you're consciously aware of it. These conversations are for leaders who are capable, trusted, and effective, and who are curious about how leadership is experienced internally, not just how it performs externally. There's nothing you need to do as you listen, no insight you need to apply. This is simply an invitation to understand what's been shaping your experience of leadership beneath the surface, and what's become possible when biology becomes part of the conversation. Let's begin, shall we? There's a quiet shift happening in leadership right now, and a lot of people are missing it. Not because it's complex or difficult to understand, but because it's subtle. It's building momentum quietly in leadership commentary and boardrooms and executive conversations, and in the way authority is being felt rather than formally defined. For a long time, authority in leadership was relatively easy to recognize. It looked like decisiveness, certainty, and the ability to stay composed under pressure. It looked like appearing calm even when things were intense, compartmentalising how you were feeling so it didn't interfere with performance, and keeping responsibility moving forward regardless of what was happening inside. And those qualities were rewarded for good reason. They created stability. They signalled reliability. They allowed organisations to function in high-pressure environments, and they became deeply embedded as markers of what good leadership looked like. But something else is now beginning to register as authority. You can feel it when you're in the presence of certain leaders. They don't rush. They don't dominate the room. They don't overmanage emotion or energy. There's a steadiness to them that subtly reorganises the space. Conversations slow, decisions clarify, the room settles without anyone needing to force it. And that steadiness, it isn't a performance of calm. It isn't compartmentalisation. It isn't emotional distance. It's regulation. What's shifting is that authority is no longer defined by how well someone can override their internal state in order to carry responsibility. It's increasingly shaped by the ability to remain regulated while holding responsibility. And I love that regulation's no longer sitting on the edge of leadership as some personal practice you keep quietly to yourself. It's moving into the center as a core component of authority itself, and I think that's cool. Now, to understand why this shift matters, we need to understand where the previous leadership model came from, because it didn't appear randomly and it wasn't wrong. It was adaptive. So leadership involved in environments that demanded consistency under pressure. Tight timelines, high stakes, limited margin for error. In those conditions, leaders who could compartmentalize, suppress personal response, and appear calm no matter what was happening internally within themselves, well, they were seen as safe. They stabilized the system. Embracing became part of the job. And I saw this very clearly early in my own career. During a reference check, one of my previous bosses was asked how I dealt with stress. His response was, she doesn't get stressed. And I remember hearing that and thinking, that's really interesting, because I did get stressed. I mean, like, really stressed. I just didn't show it. I built my career on being the safe pair of hands, the one who could be relied on, the one who could hold things together, absorb pressure and keep moving. And I was good at it. That capability earned trust, responsibility, and progression. But what wasn't visible was the internal cost of being that way. Appearing unflappable became a form of leadership currency. Keeping emotion contained signaled professionalism. Compartmentalizing internal experience so performance stayed clean was rewarded. And these behaviors weren't personality traits. They were learned strategies. And for many women, they weren't optional, right? Now, this isn't weakness. It was intelligence. The nervous system adapts to what earns safety and credibility. When leadership environments rewarded composure and containment, the body learned to deliver exactly that. Over time, bracing stopped feeling like a strategy, and it started feeling like a baseline functioning. And the problem is that suppression's not the same as sustainability, right? When you lead from suppression, pressure doesn't disappear, it accumulates. And sooner or later, that cork will pop. Sometimes it shows up as health issues, sometimes as exhaustion, sometimes as a sudden inability to tolerate what you've always handled. I'm still a safe pair of hands. That hasn't changed. But what has changed is how I hold responsibility, because I no longer do it through suppression. I do it through regulation. And that distinction matters. The old leadership model didn't require regulation. It required override, and override has its limits. So what we're seeing now isn't a rejection of responsibility or competence. It's a recognition that constant internal override can't remain the foundation of authority. The environments leaders are operating in are more complex. They're more relational, more human. And when the pressure can no longer be absorbed internally, it doesn't disappear. Because pressure that's suppressed doesn't vanish. It transfers, it leaks. It shapes how decisions are made, how rooms feel, and how people respond, even when nothing obvious is being said. Now, we know from neuroscience that the autonomic nervous system is constantly scanning for safety and threat. It does this automatically, faster than conscious thought. It's why you can walk into a room and feel that something's off before you can explain why. Research also shows that nervous systems don't operate in isolation. They influence each other. And this is often referred to as co-regulation, and it's particularly strong in hierarchies. When there's a power differential, people unconsciously take cues from the person with the most authority. And that wiring is old, right? This isn't a corporate thing. It comes from how humans evolved in groups. In any tribe, The state of the leader mattered because it signaled whether it was safe to settle or necessary to stay alert. Even though our workplaces aren't tribes in structure, our nervous systems are still operating with that same logic. So if you're the leader, your nervous system carries weight. Your pace, your tone, how quickly you respond, how you handle uncertainty, whether your body is settled or braced, all of that is information. People's nervous systems register it before they ever analyze your words or your strategy. This is why you can have a team of capable, self-aware, regulated individuals and still find that the environment feels tight. Even people who do their own regulation work will unconsciously orient upwards. They adjust their behavior, their energy, their risk tolerance, because that's how the autonomic nervous system works in hierarchies. It's also why appearing calm isn't the same as being regulated. From the outside, things can look fine. Meetings still run, decisions still get made, people show up and do their jobs, and that's often taken as evidence that everything's working. But neuroscience tells us something else. Sustained sympathetic activation, staying slightly on alert for long periods of time, is physiologically taxing. People can remain productive while their nervous systems are under strain, right? In fact, that's often how burnout develops, not through collapse, but through prolonged coping. So what happens instead is this. People push through tiredness. Some days feel harder than others for no obvious reason. Energy dips get normalized. Recovery takes longer. And because nothing dramatic is happening, people often assume it's a personal issue rather than a systemic one. Not because the leader's doing anything wrong deliberately, but because pressure at the top sets the tone the rest of the system's responding to. Now, here's the good news on all this, right? When a leader is regulated, the opposite's also true. Research on stress recovery shows that when the nervous system has clear signals of safety, it can move out of alertness more efficiently. In practical terms, that means people recover faster. They think more clearly, and they don't need to brace themselves just to get through the day. And that's why leadership influence isn't just strategic or relational. It's physiological. The internal state you lead from becomes the environment others are working inside. Pressure that's suppressed doesn't vanish. It transfers, it leaks, and in leadership roles, it leaks into the nervous systems of the people around you. It's just how human biology works. And here's the thing. Being calm is not the same thing as being regulated. Many leaders are very good at looking composed, schooling your face. They've learned how to school their face, modulate their tone, keep their delivery professional. They don't react visibly. They hold it together. And from the outside, that reads as stability. Did you notice how it felt when I talked about holding it together? Tight, constricted. And from a nervous system perspective, composure and regulation aren't interchangeable. You can be internally braced while externally calm. And the autonomic nervous system doesn't respond to the polish. It responds to whether there's safety or sustained alertness. And safety, biologically speaking, is very narrowly defined. It's not about competence or reassurance or good intentions. It's about whether the body senses enough permission to actually settle. And that internal activation shows up even when nothing obvious is being said. It's in how you hold your body, the tightness in your jaw, the tension across your shoulders, the pace and pressure of your speech, the way decisions are made quickly, not because they need to be, but because slowing down feels uncomfortable. And from the outside, this can still look like effective leadership, right? Things move, outputs happen, conversations stay efficient. But when a leader's suppressing activation to appear calm, the system around them stays slightly on edge, and your team feels that, not consciously, but biologically. So people respond by staying sharp, switched on, careful. They think twice before speaking. They prioritize speed over reflection. They default to execution rather than exploration. And over time, this narrows decision making. It reduces creativity and it concentrates responsibility upwards. Things are landing with you because there isn't permission to be bold. And organizations often misread this as high performance, right? In reality, it's actually a system running on vigilance. Regulation, on the other hand, isn't about managing how you look. It's about the nervous system having enough capacity to stay settled while holding responsibility. A regulated leader can slow a conversation without losing authority. They can tolerate silence. They can sit with uncertainty without tightening the room around them. Their presence doesn't require others to stay braced in order to function. And this is why regulation changes how leadership's experienced. It doesn't make leaders passive or less decisive. It changes how authority lands. People don't need convincing. They don't need managing. They trust the leadership without bracing against it. Authority stops relying on control to be effective. Decisions land, directions hold, things move without people tightening just to keep up. Leadership doesn't have to be pushed. It's received. When you put all of this together, the shift actually becomes very clear. Authority is no longer being shaped by who can hold the most pressure, who can move the fastest, or override themselves the longest. It's being shaped by who can stay regulated while holding responsibility consistently. And this doesn't lower the bar for leadership, it actually rises it. I'll say that again. This doesn't lower the bar for leadership, it actually raises it. Because regulation asks more of a leader, not less. It asks for internal coherence and complexity, presence and uncertainty, the capacity to hold authority without relying on urgency, control, or suppression to get things done. And when that happens, leadership changes shape. Teams don't just perform, they stabilize. Responsibility distributes instead of bottlenecking with you. Decisions don't need force behind them. Directions hold without people tightening just to keep up. And this is why regulation's becoming the new authority. Not because it's a trend or a preference, but because it aligns with how human systems actually function. Biology doesn't care about hierarchy charts or leadership language. It responds to signals of safety, of clarity and coherence. When you step back and look at what's actually shaping influence, what's actually shaping trust and sustainability in leadership right now, the pattern's consistent. This is what leadership looks like when biology is no longer ignored. So in a few days, on the 18th, 19th and 20th of February, I'm hosting a live experience. It's called The Biology of Leadership. It's where we take this conversation out of theory and into application, looking at how leadership is shaped, stabilized, or strained at the level of the nervous system itself. This isn't performance training. It isn't even mindset work. It's an exploration of the biological foundations of authority and what changes when leaders stop overriding their systems and start working with them. You'll find the details wherever you're listening to this. And if this conversation's resonated for you, you'll recognize that being in the room matters. I'm sending you lots of love. Bye for now. Hey, thanks for listening to today's podcast. Can I ask you a favor? If our conversation spoke to you today, could you please take a moment to leave a 5-star review? Your review will help people discover this podcast, and together we can create a world where there's even more love and more laughter. And if you want to hear more from the Project Joyful podcast, just click the subscribe button. Bye for now.